So we have our table over here, right? And then I did say that we have our table, and then we have our table row, we have another table row, and another table row. What we want to do is we want this cost accounting to appear over here. You realize that it's in this particular row and it's in this particular row. So we're going to have what? An attribute called the row span, right? So when we come over here, the table data, we add an attribute called what? The row span, and give it a value of 2. And when we do that, we have to come back here and remove that particular attribute, that particular item. So you realize that our cost accounting is now showing here, and it's taking up 2 spaces. Are you getting it? I'm not save it. The same way, if on Tuesday morning and afternoon we are going to be studying the social studies, what we do is we go to Tuesdays morning, right? And then we give what? A column span or a call span, right? Because it's going to span from this column to this column. So we give it a call span and then a value of 2. Let me save, and then it pushes down. It pushes it. Then we have to go to where the next column, right? Now we are not going to the next row. We are going to the next column, and then we'll remove the economics from there, and we have everything running perfectly fine for us. So it means on Tuesdays, morning and afternoon, we are going to be studying social studies. And then on Thursdays and Friday mornings, we are going to be studying accounting, right? Great. And before then, I first of all, I was trying to introduce the table head, the table body, and then the table foot, right? And those ones do not change the structure. So let me bring this inside what it T head. Sorry, right? Bring this there, and I saved, right? But nothing is happening. Now let me bring my T body, right? And let me wrap it. Let me wrap the body around everything in the table body, and it's saved. You realize that it doesn't change the structure of the page. It doesn't change the structure of the page. It's just that it adds a more semantic meaning to HTML structure, and it helps in assistive technology. Another element which we can add is the caption, right? So we can say octa skills, sorry, octa skills timetable, and it shows right on top of our page. Let me see if I added a caption. Right, I added a caption over here. And so basically, this is the basic structure of the HTML. Then after the T body, we can have the T foot, and then we can say, uh, let me bring an HTML entity over here and say 2024. No, this is not supposed to be here. Let's take this. T body closes it. Yeah, and so we have our table running like this. So basically, this is what we are going to be doing on tables today. There is a lot more which you need to cover on tables, but we will be looking at all of them right now. I'll, however, include a link to the MDN documentation on tables, so in your spare times you can read more on them. Anybody have any questions at the moment? Yeah, Enoch, you can ask your question.
Okay, so my question is, with modern websites, are table frequently used on
Yes,
modern websites?
tables are used. Now, a brief history. Back in the 90s, when website development just started out, people used tables for defining the layout of a website. I get it. So when you go to a website and you have an item and then another item beside it, What they usually use is what they use the tables, but recently there have been improvements. There have been new things added to HTML and CSS, and so we don't use the tables to define the structure of HTML web page again. However, tables are used for different purposes. Are you getting it? For example, on a web page where you would want to show a timetable, it's going to be over there. Also, when you have a dashboard, right, and then you have a list. Let me maximize this page. I think there's a dashboard template over here. Now let me look over here. Great. So looking at whatever we have, it's a table that is showing over here. Are you getting it? It's a table. So a table was used to create this, and it has been styled to look this nice. So in instances like this, we use a table. Are you getting it?
Yes, please.
Great. Anybody having any other question? Yes, we usually whenever it comes to styling. So far, whenever it comes to Michael is asking if we have any attributes which can be used to style tables without CSS. Now, the moment you are styling something, it becomes CSS. I get it because that is the styling. And then we have inline styling. We have three forms of styling web pages. We have the external style sheet, we have the internal style sheet where you come to the top of your page and then you define your style, and then you can say, okay, you want to style H1, you select it, and then you say color red, right? And you save, and it's going to happen. I get it. So this is called internal styling, and you put the style inside the head section. Another way which you can style a web page is by what um, inline styling. And so in that instance, you what define you use the style attribute style, then you say what color red, and then it's also going to affect it. I get it. So this is inline CSS, and then you can use it on any of the elements over here. Michael, I hope your answer is your question is answered. So one thing is any style which you can, any property you can apply inside the style sheet, you can use it over here. However, it's not advisable to go for inline styling because for one, reusability. When you write code, you must be able to reuse the code. And so when you are using inline styling, you can't use one style for all. For even up to two elements, it's not possible. So if I have what a table head over here and a table head over here, and I want to apply the same styling, I have to repeat myself. But when I am using external style sheet or maybe the internal style sheet, I can just bring the selector and say th, for example. When I say, oh, let me first of all bring my style tag, my style element, sorry, style, then I can say th, then I can say color, blue, red, blue, violet, and you realize that all of them are showing. Are you getting it? If I don't want to do this and I want to use inline styling, that means I have to copy this, for example, like this. And then if I want to style all my table data, I have to apply to each of them for it to affect all of them. And so using um, the internal style sheet or external style sheet helps you write a dry code. When we say a dry code, it simply means do not repeat yourself. And so if you can use one thing to have multiple effects, then you go for that. Are you getting it? Michael, I hope your question is answered. All right, great. Anybody else having any other question? I did mention that we are going to be closing early today, so we're going to be very snappy with whatever we are going to do. We will be spending only an hour and a half. Anybody else having any other question? Okay, so that's all that we'll be looking at. on tables for now. Next thing we are going to be looking at is forms. And so far, as we have started, we realize that whatever we have created, whatever information we have, whatever websites or web pages we have created are only one way communicated, or communications are happening only one way. I get it, which means that it's the website owner or it's the company giving information to the visitor or the user of the website. How about the company taking information from what the user? Say the company wants to get a feedback for a product. Let's say you buy a product you use and they say, okay, did you like our product? Give us a feedback. Now the company wants to hear back from the user. That's where forms become important. Or we want somebody to register for a particular event or any other thing. You realize that when you wanted to register for the training, um, you appeared on this particular website and you filled your data. So this is a form. And so in today's episode, we are going to be looking at what HTML forms. And so we move on. And when you want to bring a form, we bring a form by declaring uh, the form element. So we have we have the form element over here, right? And then the form element takes a few attributes. One of them is what the action attribute. Are you getting it? Then another is what the method attribute. Are you getting it? So these are the two basic ones. There is another attribute called the encryption type, the enc type. David, I bet if you bring your voice down small game here. So let me take the encryption type off for now. David, Dave, Dave, David, Junior. I don't make you bring your voice down small give me. I don't make you bring your voice down small give me. Yeah, sorry for that. So the action attribute here, it takes what the name of a file. Are you getting it? When you submit a form, now first of all let me just put in a few um, elements which can go inside the form attribute. Like we have what the input, right? So we have input text, and when we save, you realize that what we have a text box, right? And then we can also have another input type as what button, right? Then we say what click me. Great. So let's say we enter something over here. We say we want to put a name like what James. Then we go to click me. You realize that the form gets processed. Whatever is there is gone. Are you getting it? And so when we connect this particular form to a backend, what we are going to do is that we want the form data to be passed onto another file. Are you getting it? And that file is going to what? To process our form for us. So we are going to what? Let's say we want to pass the form data to another page called what? Form processor dot php. You know, usually you want to process your form with a PHP or a backend language. Are you getting it? And so when I come here and I say James and I go to what click me, you realize that it says what? It redirects me to that particular page because there is no page as such. So I can come here and says what form dot php, right? So when I go back here now and I say James and I click here, Now it takes me to the PHP file, and I'm currently not running. My workspace is not running in a PHP environment, so it's showing me, it's giving me this error, right? If I should be running on a PHP environment, then it's going to show for me. So let me just say that, let me just make this an HTML file, and then here, let me just do this form processor, rename it to HTML, then say um, H1, your form, the form has been submitted, right? And so when I come back here, and then I say, okay, Daniel, and then I submit, it takes me to what? That particular page, and it tells me that what your form has been submitted. Of course, in a real life, you would want to write a code, and it's going to be in a backend language like PHP or Python or whatever. I'm just using HTML for the sake of this tutorial. So whatever you put over here, it's sent to that particular file. So that's what the action attribute is. So then the method is it's going to define the method by which the submission is going to be made. I get it. And we have the post method, right? And it's used for sending data onto the server. We also have another method, which is what the get method, right? And then when we begin with PHP, we are going to be we'll understand this a lot more. And so what the difference is that when you're using the get method, it passes the form data in the what in the browser. And so in instances where the user is entering a sensitive information like their credit card details, their password, you wouldn't want to process that using the get method. I get into, for example, I say Daniel, and then I go and what click me, right? It's not showing over here because I haven't specified a name, right? So let me give it a name of what first name. Come back onto my page. Let me go back. Let me submit this again. Let me refresh this page. Let me give it a name. And then you realize that inside my browser, it's showing as what? Form processor.html. And then it's passing what? A parameter. First name equals what? Eric. Are you getting it? So should you be collecting from the sensitive data like credit card details or passwords? It's going to be passed in the browser, and it's not safe for web security. And so in such an instance, you would want to use the post method to submit your data. So going back, let me refresh the page and put in Eric, and you realize that I'm back on that same page, but it's not what showing inside the address bar. So basically, that is it. So let's proceed to look at some other input elements which you can have. Let me take away the ID as well. And then the name, the input type over here, we have what? The input takes a type of what? Text, which is what we are saying over here, and it takes another attribute, which is what? The first name. And now because the form is going to be processed by this particular file, this file is going to find the value of this particular input by what? This name. So it's going to be like an array of data sent to this particular file with each of them having a key. The name here is going to be the key by which the entry is going to be located. You understand this a lot better when we start with PHP. So you guys should stick around. Now the inputs can also take another attribute like required. Are you getting it? And what that does is that it makes it compulsory for the user to enter data over here. Are you getting it? So when the user doesn't enter any data, they go on click me, they get an error, which means the field is required. If we take the required off and the user doesn't enter anything, they can click it and the form will still be processed. So that's what the required attribute does. And then it can take another attribute such as what? Hidden. Are you getting it? and it's going to show, but it's going to be on a web page, but it won't show for the user. However, when you get to look at the source code, so I'm just going to inspect elements, body, my form, and you realize that the input element is shown over there, just that it won't show for the user. And so that's another attribute that it takes. I get it. So let me just remove the hidden. And then there is another attribute which can be put, we can bring, like the placeholder. And the placeholder is the placeholder, let me say, first name. And what the placeholder does is what it defines the kind of data that you are expecting the user to put over there. So when the moment I start typing my name, you realize that that goes away. So basically, that's what the placeholder does. Then let me take off my button for now because I want us to add another another element which we usually use within the form in HTML form is what the label element. I get it. So here I'm going to go what label for first underscore name. So the name that I have assigned to this particular input, because I'm bringing a label for that input, I'm going to use that name over here. Then here I can say what first name. Here I can say first name. All right. And so when I save, this is what we are going to be saying. I get it. Then I can let me bring a line break. Then I can say okay, label for what last name, and then I bring what last name, right? Then I can bring another input. Input type equals what text. The name here is going to be what last name. Then it should be required as well. Required, and let's give it a placeholder of what last name. I getting it. So let me bring another line break. And so we have our first name, our last name, and that's just a few. And then I just saw another element. We can have what a read only, a read only. So we can have input, right? Type equals text. Then we can another thing which we can do is to pre-assign a value for what the input field. Are you getting it? So when I come here and I say, let me just bring this down, I can give it what I can give it what a value of what James, right? And now you realize that the James is what is filled in the space already. So that's another value that can be taken. Then we can also have another input type of text. Then we can also give it a value of what Michael. Let's say it's a name. Oops, Michael. I get it. Now we can pass an attribute called read only. I get it onto this particular field, and what that is going to do is it's going to make this what read only. So the user can read only means you can read, you can't what you can't modify it, you can't change it. So when you type, nothing is going to happen. So that's what the read only field does. And then I introduced the hidden attribute over here earlier. We can also have another input type, right? Input type of hidden, input type hidden, and let's say hidden field. And it's also just like when you add the hidden attribute to any of the elements, it's going to be on the page, but it can't be seen by the user. So you have to look at the source code or inspect the elements to be able to see that. And the hidden attribute or using the input type hidden, it's very it's necessary, or it plays a good role when you are passing data from one point to another and you wouldn't want the user to be bothered. I get you. it's not going to affect the user, doesn't have to change anything, but you need to pass that user into that form. And then when the form is submitted, you pick that particular value and then use it later. We'll see a typical example of it when we begin to work with PHP. And so I have lesson structure planning. So we'll be covering most of those things as we move along. And then another input type which we can look at is the input type of what range. I get it. We have input range, and then we can have name is what age. I get it. Let's say, yeah, let me just get rid of the ID for now and let me save it. All right, so this is what a range. I get it. It's a slider. So maybe you can slide to select a volume or select an age or whatever it is the use case may be. And then the input type range also takes some other attributes such as the mean, right? And so the mean defines the minimum value. Are you getting it? So the mean here you can say 20, right? Which means it's going to start from 20. Then we can say the max, can define the max to be what? 50. Are you getting it? Which means this is going to be what from 50 to what? Sorry, from 20. So here it's going to, when it's here, it's 20. When it's here, it's 50. By default, it's, I think it's 0 to 10, but you can also specify it as you want. Then there is also another attribute which we can introduce as what the step attribute, and then the step attributes is a default 1, right? And so we have 20 over here. When you move 1, it's 21, 22, 23, and it goes. But I can specify the steps to what to 10. Are you getting it? And when I come here, when I start to move, you realize that it jumps to the 10th position, right? Then it jumps. So it means you can move in tens. And so that is what the step does. And it's used on what? The input type, the range input type. Another input type which we can look at is input type what? Check. Checkbox, right? So the checkbox, we can say newsletter, right? Let me get rid of the ID for now. Great. And so we can bring a label here and say label for news letter, right? Let me bring an S over here and say sign up for a weekly newsletter, right? Let me bring yeah. So you realize that there are times where you are filling a form and then they give you a checkbox and say, okay, do you want to sign up for a newsletter or do you want to include this or that as well? Where you have the option to check or uncheck that particular option, right? So you can click here and then it's going to be checked, or you can what uncheck it. I get it. So that's what the checkbox does. And the checkbox also takes um, you can take another attribute such as what the checked, all right? And when you have the check, when the page loads, you realize that it's going to be already checked. Are you getting it? It's going to be checked already, but it means by default it's activated. If the user doesn't want it, then the user can what remove it themselves. Then we have what another input type. Let me put that input type what in a div, and then let me give it what. Let me bring a p. Then so what select your gender, right? Then I can bring an input type of radio, an input type of radio, and name is what gender, right? Now the input type of name and gender, this is how it's going to show, right? Now we can add another attribute of what value and say what male, right? It's not going to show over here. We have to use what a label to make it show. So label for what for male, right? Label for male, and then we say male. So this is what it's going to show. Let me bring a break. Then let me repeat the same thing. Then we can say, let's just change the value to what? To female. Then label for female. Then let's have female, right? So this is what it's going to be. Let me not bring the line break. Let me leave it like this. Great. So we are going to what? Select gender. Now you realize that with each of the fields that we have included what? A name, right? And the name has to be unique for each field, which means the first name I've brought over here, the first name shouldn't appear anywhere else it's going to create a conflict when we are fetching the form data. And so, but then there is something over here. You realize that we have two different inputs of the same type, radio. We have an input type of radio. Sorry, we have an input type of radio. Then the name here is gender. The name here is what? Gender as well. Oh, come on. We have gender and gender here. All right. And the reason we have to repeat the same name is to make sure that only one of those options can be selected, because we can have somebody who is a male and a female at the same time, right? And so we need to give the same name, so that when the person selects male and then they come back and select female, the male is going to be what deactivated. However, if we have what different names, are you getting it? Now the user can select both of them, because the system is going to treat them as what? As different properties or different elements, right? So we need to give them the same name. Then only one can be selected at a go. Anybody having any questions so far? Christopher says my voice is faint, kind of low. Anybody else who's not hearing me well? If my voice is loud and clear, let me know. If you feel my voice is not clear enough, let me know as well. All right. Okay. So we let's proceed to look at another input type. Let's proceed to look at another input type, which is the select, right? So inside we can have select name is what? We can have a name. We can have a name of course, right? Then let me get rid of the ID. So inside the select, we can have what? Another element called what? The option. And so the option takes what? A value. Then we can say website development, right? Maybe we want the user to select a course. Then here we bring what? Website development. Then we can have another option as well. And then that's going to be graphic design. So this is going to be what? Graphic design. Then we can have another option, and that is going to be, let's say, phone repairs, right? Then phone repairs. So let me give a little bit of explanation over here. And then when you look at the name over here, it's just, as I said earlier, the key to identify this particular field. Are you getting it? Now, each of the options contains what a value, and the value is what is going to be passed onto the form processor. Now, the whatever we are seeing over here, the one in white, is what the user will see. Are you getting it? What the user will see. But the value is what is going to be passed on for the to the form processor, and so uh, the option field can also contain some other properties or attributes, such as we can have what is selected attribute, right? And so when you have the selected attribute, if the user comes onto the page, that one is going to be selected by default. The very first list will be selected, right? So I can come to what mobile phone and then bring the selected over here. Now, when I come, you realize that when the page loads, mobile phone is what is selected by default. Another attribute that you can add to the option field is what disabled. And then when you come there, you realize what the graphic design is disabled, which means you cannot select that one. I think the same thing is here. When you come, all the fields are what disabled. Only one is active for selection. And so maybe there is a particular field you wouldn't want the user to select. You do that. Anybody having any questions so far? Great. So another thing which we can do for inside the select option is, let's say we have different groups of options. Are you getting it? So we can first of all have an opt group or the option group, right? Then the option group takes an attribute called what label, and then the label is going to be what, let's say, tech skills, right? And so let's move all of this over there. Then we can have what, another opt group, and that's also going to take what, another, sorry, a label, and we're going to pass on a value as what, home skills. Let me just say something like that, right? And let me just bring this over here, and then let me change this to, let's say, baking, right? Baking. So we change here to what, baking. Then we can change here to, let's say, frying. Let me just put some random items over here. Disabled, selected, and frying. Then we can also bring another thing here, like what? Let's say cleaning. All right. So somebody is what coming to learn. And now you realize that what we have grouped the options into, we have put them into several groups, matching groups, right? So we have tech skills. So these are tech skills. These are things we do at home. So the person is going to choose which of them they want to learn. So that's basically what the option group does. And then let's look at another form element, which is the file, right? Input type file. So input file. Sorry, input type file, and then let me give it what, a profile, and then let me delete the ID for now. Let me take off the ID for now, right? And then the input. Let me bring the line break over here. Create another one. So when I click here, I can now be able to what? To upload a file, right? And then the file will also be passed on to process the form. And anytime you are working with forms and you have to upload a file, then there is another attribute which you have to add to the form element over here, right? Which is what the encryption type, and you use what the multi-part form data, which means you are going to what upload an element, and so that's going to enable the processor to process the media file that will be uploaded. And so remember to include the enc type anytime you have a form with an input type of file. Then another attribute which the input type of file can take is the accept. Sorry, it's the accept attribute, and it's going to define the type of files that what have to be accepted. So, for example, we want to accept only PNG files, so we're going to do something like what image slash what PNG. I get it. So when I come here, we realize that it's only showing me PNG files that are available. By default, it sets what PNG. If I want to include JPEG as well, we're gonna have what image slash what JPG. Then I can have image slash what JPEG. Then I can have image slash GIF. Right now, when I come here, you realize that it's uh, sorry, I'm supposed to bring comments here. So it's going to spread the files which I have specified are going to show over here. Then I can those file types that are available on my machine are going to show here for me to select. And so that's it on the input file, the input type of file. And then there are some other input types which we can look at, like the password, which is one very popular input type. Input, then password. So we have the input type of password. Let's give it a name of what password. Let me just take off the ID for now. And two line breaks here would be great. Great. So that's nice. So over here, let me give it a label. Label for password. Then I can say password, right? And so I can come here and then type my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 password over there, and it's going to be matched just like a password is matched. Then the password field can also contain the placeholder attribute, right? The placeholder attribute, and you can say password here, and it's going to show just like the placeholder shows for the input type of text. And that's it for the input types. That's not all. There is another attribute which we can introduce, which is the autocomplete, and it's going to let me what's the input type of last name, right? So I can give it an attribute of what autocomplete, and it's going to give me a list of data types which I would like the browser to suggest for the user. Are you getting it? And so I can use what family name as what the last name. All right. So when I come here, it's going to define a list of last names that I've ever entered in my browser. Are you getting it? Now, when I can come here, I can say given name, which is going to show my first name. So when I can realize it's going to show a list of, oh, come on, go back. It's going to show a list of first names which what I have entered. Are you getting it? And then we can also have what autocomplete type of what of address, right? Let me say level one address. Let me save, and when I come here, something is not right. It's supposed to show an address. That is. That's what's supposed to show. Let me try one more time. Oh, it's wrong. When I say an input address line one, let me see, something is definitely wrong somewhere. Let me come here, input type. No, let me make it a text. Right. Okay, so let me not give it a name. Let me just go to autocomplete and let me say family name, and let me see what that suggests. So it's suggesting a family name over here, right? So I think because I gave it a name over here, the name attribute here also affects the suggestions that the browser gives. So that is what's affecting it from showing well. So let me bring my BR over here, and then when I change this to what to giving name, you realize that it's suggesting my first name because I've entered it several times. Are you getting it? So it's going to look for pre-saved addresses in your browser and suggest them. When I say address level one and I come here, you realize it's going to show what the address rather. So that is what the autocomplete does. And when you come here, there are a list of values which you can pass, like credit card expiry dates, and if you've ever entered it, it's going to suggest that for you. So that's what the autocomplete that does. When you visit the Mozilla Developer Network and you look up autocomplete, it's going to give you an extensive data on what those values are. And VS Code is also a very good code editor. It shows us what values we can pass on to into that particular attribute. So when I come here, it's going to show me. Let me save it. And when I come here, it's going to show what the country. And so that's the autocomplete. But that's what the autocomplete attribute does. What other file input type can we look at again? Yes, the input type reset. And so for the input reset, what it does is that what? Let me give you what I reset. What it does is it clears what the form data. Are you getting it? So let me come here and let me change this to Michael. Then let me change this to Jordan. Right? Then this Michael over here. Okay, I think this is a read only, so it can be modified. Let me move this to the very end. Let me deactivate this. Let me choose female. Then I'm changing this to baking. Let me select a file. Let me select this image. Let me put a password of 789, and then let me put Ghana over here. Right. So when I click on reset, it's going to clear everything. It's going to refresh the form, clear everything, and make it default, just as it was when the page was loaded. So that's what the reset input type does. And then we also have other input types. I initially brought the button, the button, right? And so it says what? Click me. Well, there are other ways by which we can bring a button onto a web page as well. Yeah, then we can also bring a button by introducing what the input type, which is what submit, right? And then we pass it the value of what submit. Now, if you don't pass it the value, there's going to be a default value given to it, which is what submit. But we can also pass in what a custom value, such as what, let's say register, and that's what's going to show over there. Now, this input type button, this register, they all do the same thing. So you can choose to bring any of them, whatever it is that is appropriate for you. Um, in an instance where you are going to add an icon to the button, then you may want to go in for the button, all right? You may want to go in for the input, the button element, so that you can now add an icon over here. When we will be looking at working with icons, mm, I think on Monday when we make the refresher, we'll briefly look at working with icons. If we're able to do this it today, fine. If not, we'll do that on Monday. So That's the input type. Then we can also bring input type button, and it's also going to do the same thing. We bring the value of what another button, and what they are going to do is after you click it, it's going to what? It's going to submit the form later. So this is now takes precedence, and it goes. So basically, that is it. That is what we are going to be looking at on input types. Anybody have any questions so far? Anything that is not clear, which we have to? Yeah, Ajuman, you can ask your question. Ajuman, can you ask your question? All right, Enoch.
Sir, please, I want to ask, um, the select element, can you give it a range besides
Can you give
reduce?
it?
A range, like you see, if you go to, if you visit other websites, sorry, then they will give you maybe an age, then you select, then the numbers follows, so, or maybe a year, then it follows. Can you give that kind of option to
Okay,
the
so
select
that's also
element?
another input type, which is what the date. All right. So there are lots of input types. We can look at them all. It's good. Input date. All right. So when we look at the input type date, we click on it. We can now what? We can select a date. Are you getting it? Does it have an input type of year? No, nothing like that. But we can have an input type of time as well, and you can use it to pick a time. Let me just do this, and there is lots of input types which you can pick. I get it. So we have number, range, search, tell, time, and a whole of them. We also have an input type of what of email. I get it, and it's going to check that the user is entering an email. And one thing is what you were asking, it depends on the design structure of the website. You may want to bring in years for the person to select. Let's say which year have you completed senior high, or whatever it is, and the person is going to select. And so yes, you can do that for the select um, option. Is your question answered, or are you still confused?
So it's answered, so
All
thank you.
right, great. And Chanel is asking, what about the password confirm? So with the password confirm, you're just going to repeat the password field and then change the label to confirm password. And then you are going to use what? A language such as JavaScript or PHP. Well, because we're working on front end for now, you use JavaScript to ensure that what those two fields match. If it doesn't match, you alert the user. Shano, your hand is still up. Any other question again?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, how do you do a multi-select?
Come again.
A multi-select.
Multi-select, great. So when you want to do multi-select, you have the multi-select attribute which you also add to the select element, right? So you set right what multiple, and when you come over here, you can now select. You can click on website development, and then you can hold Control and click on another thing. So we have multiple selections done over here. So that's how you do a multiple selection. Any any other questions so far? Yeah, Nanajiman, you can speak.
Sir, please, I was asking, like, regards to the input,
Yeah,
I can see with the set, the one you label as reset.
yeah.
Is it supposed to be a button or it is supposed to be an input? Because I'm confused
The
over there.
reset is an input, but it shows as a button. So input type reset, input type button, input type submit. They all show as a button. They are all buttons. Are you getting it?
So you can use input as a button
Yes, you
from
can use.
what you are saying.
Yes, you can use input as a button. So when you put in, you see what we have here. It's register, right? And it's showing us a button. We have input type button, and it's showing us a button. Then we have a button element, which is also showing us a button.
Oh, okay.
Great. So, any other questions so far? Good. Okay. So, I think we have about quarter of an hour more for our time to elapse, and let's look at the next thing, which is a few other semantic elements. And there is we are first of all, and I did mention the other day we were supposed to treat this, but then most of them skipped me. So I just want to use this time. We look at them again. So we looked at the article element back that time, but we also have another element called what, the section element, and just that the name applies, it's used for creating sections. So when you have a website and it's divided into different sections, maybe you have a one pager or a one page website, then you have the hero section, you have the about section, you have the contact section, then you're going to use sections for each of them. And then maybe inside your sections, you're going to have what, maybe about us, right? So let me bring an H2 and say what about us. And then I can have a paragraph. And then let me bring a lorem, right? Then I can bring a button here and say maybe a link and say what, read more, and then this link is going to take us to what, the about us page. So this is how we usually use what, the section. I getting it. Then inside the section you have a lot more items in the section. Are you getting it? So let's say we are going to have multiple columns, right? Let me just I don't want to touch CSS right now, but suppose we have this section, then we're going to have what, an image, all right? Sorry, img, then we have we have this over here, right? So this image is showing, then this here we can put this in our article element, and it doesn't change the structure, but it adds some more semantic meaning, and it helps with assistive technology. And so that's what we have, the section over here. And then we also have the article, which is what we just used over here. And then we also have what, the header. Are you getting it? Now, most people use divs with most of, well, with the section, with the article, whatever it is we are doing over here, we can use a div. It simply means what, a divider. But the div doesn't state what the page is about or that particular element is about. And so we can, when we want to create a header element, then we can use what, the header element over here. Then we can bring in our logo, right? So we can say we are going to bring in our logo. We bring in what, our nav bar. Are you getting it? So we bring in an image, we bring in an image, then we bring in what, our nav, our nav bar. So the nav is what, another semantic element, right? So inside your nav you can bring what, your ul li, then you can have home, so you can have about, and then contact, right? And so basically this is what is, maybe that's our navigation menu. So anytime you are going to bring the nav menu, you use what, the nav element, so that it adds semantic element meaning. And then we also have the main. So looking at the structure of a website, you probably let me just create a page over here and call this new.html. Then let me give this what, new page. Then I'm now having my new page, right? So first of all, I want to create my header. So I create the header. Then let me add some style over here, right? So let me say header. So let me give it a background of black, right? Then inside my header, I'm going to have my logo. I'm just writing logo. Let me make it an H1 because I don't want to bring in an image for now. Let me give color of which, and then we have our logo. And then inside our header, again, we are going to have what? Our nav. Then we bring our UL, LI, then we can have what? Our home. Right, then we have LI about. Then we have what? LI contact. Right, I'm not adding links to them because I just want to give an example. Then I think we are done with our nav bar, so we are done with our header. Then after we are done with our header, we are going to have what the main element. That's what the main page is going to be about, and that's where we are going to have all our other sections. So maybe we are going to have what the section. I get in a section, and then give it a class of what a hero section, right? And we are going to have. Let me just make this about. We're going to have an about section, and then we bring in. Let me just bring whatever I have put over here and bring this inside. All right, and then we have a section. If something is wrong, wait, so I didn't close my article. Great, now the article is closed, so everything is right now. And so we have our section. Then maybe we want to have another section again. Then we can have a section of what? Contact. Let's not bring an image, and then let's say we are going to bring a form over here, right? So let's take the article off, and then we can say we are bringing a form, an action, and we can have what? Label for name, then we can say first name, right? Then we can have input type text, then we can have name being what? First. No, we can have first name, then this should be first name as well. First name as well. Then let me have the break, and then last name. Then we have our last name over here. Then we are going to bring last name. All right. So you realize that we are not using divs, we are using semantic elements. And then all the sections we have over here, we have this section, and then we have this section, all being what in our main element. Are you getting it? Then when we are done with our main element, then we can also bring what? Our footer. Are you getting it? So we have another semantic element which is called what? The footer. So we can bring our footer, we can say, all right. All right, reserved. And let me bring my HTML entity. All right. Then 2024 OQTA skills center. Right. Now let me see that's showing at the bottom. Let me bring a couple of line breaks so I can take my page to the. I can scroll up so we can see. And then let me just put this in the center so I can use the center, and then it centers it. Let me bring a few breaks here just to separate it. And usually when you are building web pages, you wouldn't be using the line breaks because we're going to be using margins to create unnecessary spaces. And so that's basically how this structure is going to be. So those are semantic elements. You and then also we have another one called what the aside. Are you getting it? And I aside is usually used for sidebars. Are you getting it? For example, looking at when you look at the dashboard, this folder is this. Let me show you this. Right, you realize that they has the sidebar over here. So you can use a div to create this, and it's gonna work. You can put section, and it's gonna work. But to add a more semantic meaning, you would want to uh, use it aside, or maybe you are on a website and there is a sidebar which is showing another information. The semantic element which could be used for that is the sidebar, and so I think that's what we'll be looking at on semantic elements. And then we also have another element called a mark, which is used for highlighting. So when I come back into Nana Jumana, I will let you speak in a moment, please. When I come back onto my new HTML and I want to highlight this particular text, I can just say mark, all right? And you realize that that particular element is now highlighted for me. So that's another semantic element which you can play with. So we saw the footer, we saw the aside, we saw the mark, the main, the nav, and from next week we'll start building a lot of projects. Yeah. So I saw a hand raised, Najuman. I think that was you.
So
Yeah.
please, can I go ahead?
Yeah. You can go ahead.
Uh, I wanted to find out uh, from what you are saying. It
Yeah.
is good you use the semantic properties than to use the div.
Yes. I'm not saying don't use the div at all, but as much as possible, you avoid using divs. It's not
Okay,
going to
sir.
affect your
And then
page
one,
performance. It's not going to affect your page
oh,
performance,
okay,
though. Yeah.
it's going to work properly.
It helps with assistive technology.
Oh, okay. And then my last question: when you were doing the nav bar,
Yeah.
I saw you gave it a black, and I wanted to find out: is it possible you can give a gradient color?
Yes. You can give a gradient color, and
Okay,
that
sir.
is because where did I do that? I think in the new. So background
Yeah.
color, then you can go for a linear gradient. We are not doing CSS of here. You can go for a linear gradient. Then you can specify the tilt, so 45 degrees, and I can say black. Then I can say yellow.
Oga,
Oh, sorry, DEG.
Oga,
And so this is,
Oga, me show me class me for a while. Okay.
the gradient. That's how it works. You just specify a linear gradient. You specify the tilt. You can change it to any value you want, and it's going to show just like that for you. Then you specify the colors. You can specify as many colors as you want. We have radial gradients. We'll look at them a lot more when we are on CSS. So that's just by the way. And I think we are through. Any other questions? Yeah, Shamil, you can ask your question.
I want to know whether you can use the style element in the header or the
The
head. Can you use the style element in the head
yes,
to align the main navigation?
yes. What the style does, anything which you can do in the external CSS, you can put it here and it will work. The only reason it's not advisable is you may have when you're having a website and you have different pages, right? Since you have different pages and you have reusable elements, you don't want to work on the style for all of them. Just like when I was doing the table, I explained that if you use the inline style, which means you have to repeat yourself. The same way, if you are using the on page CSS, means you are going to repeat the same code for every page you're working on. But when you are using an external CSS, you can link all of them to that particular file, and it's going to work for all of them. So all of them are going to rely on one CSS file. And so the difference is that whatever code will work over there, you can bring it into the head, the CSS inside the head, and it will still work. Another thing is also called specificity. We have the external, we have the internal, then the inline. We'll look at those ones. They are CSS stuff, so we'll look at them over there. And I believe your question is answered, Samuel.
I'm very satisfied.
All right. Anybody having any other question? Okay, so I believe it's been a night well spent, and I'm going to give put your assignments in a group for you guys as well. Still, we've recorded a very low number, but I believe it's a weekend and we haven't really scheduled it. And I hope we're going to have a great number, a better number on Monday. So thank you guys for hanging around and have a good evening, you all.
All
Thank
right,
you, sir.
thank you. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.